okay, does this mean Fred is coming back or is he going? And if he goes, then, okay, can you work out a sign and trade? Because that's not a lot of great value being accumulated there. Same thing with Gary. And then, of course, like the whole OG question. And then, of course, on top of that, how is Jakobs fitting with this group? Maybe we'll address those in order. But right now, I mean, what's your sense? Is Fred and Gary coming back? Like,
I would think so. I mean,
okay.
To me, if you make the move to acquire Jakob and at the same time, you know that Fred and Gary are likely free agents. And by the way, Jakob's a free agent as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've talked about this before, is you have to be absolutely certain that you can bring back Gary and Fred, or you have a means to create value for them, from them in the off season through a sign and trade, which is like, you can't depend on that. Like that's, they're pretty rare transactions that actually really work out. So to me, it signals that they're doubling down on this group. They're doubling down on this style of play. If you, as a result of this or somehow sideways of this, don't bring back both Gary and Fred and don't generate some good returns on really good players, like really good players who start for you that have value, that's a real screw up. Like that's a big mistake. So I think, and look, that's nothing Bobby and Masai and everyone else wouldn't know. Like, I mean, I don't think this is something that slipped their mind. I think that they have somehow calculated that, yeah, we can bring these guys back. There's probably a number. We can do all three. We might have to make another roster move. Maybe it's, moving off a little bit more money. But to me, when you bring back, when you make the move for Jakob Pertl and trade future assets to make it happen, I think you're investing in the group as it is. And it's a big investment because, J.D. Bunkus summed it up pretty well in a tweet just a few minutes ago. But in theory, Jakob Pertl should make your team better this year. So your draft position this year is getting worse. Like you're going to be, trying for the play-in, maybe make a run at a playoff spot. You've put your pick next year. You're kind of committed to keeping that. It's sort of being a playoff team again until that pick conveys. And you're doing it all with a team that right now is 4 games under 500 and still has gaps, as we would all know.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I do feel like if you were to move in this buying direction, wouldn't you not have added a little bit more help, especially off the bench, especially as a shooter off the bench? I mean, like, I think it makes complete sense to add a center to this group. I think they've been kind of crying out for one for a while. But it does kind of feel like even though they moved in this direction, they probably could have continued to move in this direction. But listen, ultimately, I guess we don't know all the offers that were made, and perhaps maybe they just didn't get good offers for OG and Gary and Fred. Is that possible, Grange?
I mean, that cuts both ways, though, right? Because I would say you can only conclude that the offers they got for any of their players weren't enough for them to part with them. Otherwise, I presume, they would, right? But then when you look at what some of the prices were on some of the players that did move, like you mentioned, this is a team that needs shooting. Well, Luke Kennard, what did he move for? 2 second-round picks? They can kind of go down through the list. Like there's some, like if you were willing to put any number of second-round picks up to 5, it seems like.
That was a magic number this year. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you could get some pretty good quality rotation players, certainly players I think who would be in the rotation on this team. So, and yet they didn't do that either. And you could also kind of argue that, I don't know, is Jakob Pertl an overpay based on all the deals that were out there? Like, how many first-round picks were traded today?
Yeah, well,
for not Kevin Durant.
Yeah, well, that's obviously very different. He's worth every single one of those.
That's my point, though, right?
Yeah. Well,
is like there was a lot of pretty good players traded. There weren't a lot of, the Raptors were one of the very few teams that gave up a first-round pick and a pretty lightly protected one too. And one that can, it's got 3 years to convey, so it's not one of those where you give it up for a year, and then a year later it turns into magic dust. So, I'm not even convinced they paid a good price for Jakob Poeltl. I mean, they did in the sense that it didn't cost them much off their roster, but, so then we can move on to the other issues. But the whole thing, as you can tell, I'm still kind of processing it. But as I process it, there's nothing that jumps out to me that says, wow, I really get this. And most of the time when they've made moves, the years I've been covering them, I kind of go, yeah, I get this. This one makes sense, or I see their logic. And this one is escaping me a little bit.
Yeah, just interrupting you guys. From multiple sources, from the Clippers side.